Hello out there, and I'm doing a couple follow-ups today on, a number of different knives. As you can see, we have the Mantra 3 in front of us with the Sage 5, so certainly we'll be doing a little bit of a comparison there, but I really struggled trying to figure out what to name this video, and I still don't really know what the title is going to be, because there's just going to be a lot going on, and it's all going to sort of come back to this idea that I have that's called the Expendables list. What knives are expendable, how do they become expendable, and why do we choose to carry the things that we do depending on what's in our collection. And so we're going to go through all that, and that's really just going to be the crux of the topic today. But over the course of time, we are going to talk about, like I said, that Mantra and a follow-up on that, and then also the CRKT LCK. I'm going to be doing a little bit of a follow-up on that, all how it pertains to knives being expendable. So let me just start with what this whole idea, this concept is. The Expendables list is something that I've had in like the back of my mind for almost a year now. At least, actually, probably over a year now. Just the idea that sometimes I'll get a knife that I really like, that's really good, and no matter how good it is, I end up not carrying it because in its category, I have something else that I prefer. And so that knife just doesn't get used. And, that's sort of the essential for what makes something expendable to me. And certainly there are more like specific details that make you feel that way about individual knives. But everybody who has like a list like this, or everybody who has a knife that they don't carry for one of these reasons, it's going to be completely preferential. It's going to be up to the individual as to how they go about that thought process and why that is. And so we're going to go through today just a number of different examples of things that are expendable to me and things that aren't. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who are watching this who won't see it the way that I do in certain situations, but you'll probably have your own way of looking at it, just depending on what's in your collection and what kind of things you really like and just your values when it comes to knives. And so that's what's going to be cool. Obviously, I want as much feedback about this as possible, so let me know down below. But let's just get into this first example to try to make it clear for everybody. So when it comes to the Sage 5 versus the Mantra 3, my take on these two knives is that I prefer the Sage 5 100% all day, every day. There are some aspects about the Mantra 3 that are a little bit better and improved, and depending on who you are, you might prefer the Mantra for those reasons. One of them is just the overall blade length. I mean, you can see there's a difference in blade length. The Mantra 3 is longer, so some people who prefer that would definitely not see the Mantra as expendable. But for me, seeing that we have S30V, we have a really similar construction and similar handle shape and similar ergonomics, there's just really no situation where I'm going to want to carry the Mantra over the Sage. Now, if we're comparing the two of these, I do have like one of the early Sage 5s, and I don't know how the quality of this knife has improved and changed over time. Spyderco does do the constant quality improvement, but I will say that the quality of the jimping and the carbon fiber G10 laminate on the Mantra 3 is a step above the stuff on my Sage 5. So again, I'm not sure if that means all the Sage 5s are like this. Like I said, Spyderco does tend to just make a very quiet improvement and doesn't necessarily announce them every time they do it. But yeah, the comfort level and the level of like traction on this is improved, and the jimping is much more easy to get purchase on, I'd say, than on the Sage 5. But all that said, there is not a situation when I'm going to carry the Mantra 3 when I own the Sage 5. It's expendable. I don't need the knife. And yeah, I don't like it enough to force it in, and so it's not going to happen. And it's just sort of, taking up space. I don't need it. And so that's what makes it expendable to me. It's just, a matter of similarities that cause one thing to rise above the other in just a certain regard, and the other one is left behind. And there's so many aspects of this and so many potential ones. And the Expendables list can be something that happens when you buy a new knife and that knife like takes over everything else that you already have, and it's just better than some of the other knives in its category. Or like the Sage 5, I already had the Sage 5, I got the Mantra, and I was like, yeah, not really going to need that. Now, another example of it, another really good example of it, was a Hot Topic knife. And it's a CRKT LCK, the Ruger knife, because I am probably the only person on the planet who I've seen who gave this knife a not rave review. I was disappointed in it, and it was for this reason. It was the Expendables list kind of thing, where I wanted this design to wow me on the level of the Kershaw Chill, and it didn't, you know, and you know, following up about this LCK, it is a lot better than I initially thought it would be. You know, I disassembled this knife again when I got knife pivot lube, and let me see, do I have that stuff right here? When I got this stuff, I disassembled the knife again, I put some in there, I tweaked it, and the knife, the action on it, which was one of my big complaints, was that, like, I couldn't get it to flip well without side-to-side play. It's a whole lot better. It's a lot better. That was my biggest qualm with the knife, and so at 26 bucks, I mean, yeah, I don't think that it's a bad knife at all anymore. And you know, just to make sure, you know, I knew I was going to follow up on it, so I went back and watched my review of this knife, and it's actually, you know, I don't bury the thing, you know, I just say that I'm disappointed, and I wanted it to be basically the Kershaw Chill in a different design. And it still isn't, and it's still expendable, even though I like it more than I used to. You know, and I do prefer the design of the LCK over the Kershaw Chill, but just the simple action and the lightweight aspect and the G10, the Chill for me is still just a better knife, and it's almost half the price now. So yeah, for what I need and for what I wanted it to be, like I said, still just on the Expendables list, even though there are a lot of good things going for this knife, and my biggest pet peeve about it has sort of been corrected. So go figure there. But again, that's just a little more insight into how the list works for me. But some ways that you would expect it to work, it doesn't. So let me show a couple examples of that. So one of the knives that I have, and I've had this knife for a long time, it's the ZT0770CF, right? And this and the 0777 are basically the precursors to the new Kershaw Natrix line. And so you would think, having a knife like this with carbon fiber, LMAX steel, that it would make some of the lower end stuff expendable. So why would I need a Natrix, right? Well, for me, that's not the case at all. Even though you would think, well, these knives are extremely similar, almost identical in a lot of ways. There's no need for a Natrix in your collection if you have this, but I just don't see it that way, you know, and again, that's preferential. I really like the design. I want to get this design in as many different things as I can, and me having the 0770 in no way means that I'm not going to carry this, you know, and again, just my personal take on it. There's probably a number of people who have this knife who didn't have any interest in the Natrix line, you know, or there's people who got the Natrix, and, you know, if they had this knife on their list, they decided, well, I don't need that anymore, and crossed it off, you know. And so, again, it's just a matter of how you look at each individual situation. Another good example of that not being the case with me is with mini grips. You know, just a perfect example is that if someone were to have a basic 154 cm mini grip and then pick up an M4 one, that might make that 154 cm version expendable. I don't need it anymore. I've got the more high-end piece. This is the one that's going to stick with me, going to be my user, but depending on what your collection ideas are and what you're looking for in a knife and how you're going to use it, that may or may not be the case. One more example of it actually being the case is, for me, with this Browse Blades Spectre. So a while back, I think it was just before Blade Show in Atlanta, I did a comparison review between the Spectre and the Mass Drop Gent. And I liked this knife a whole lot more than the Gent. And I, even though the price point wasn't really all that agreeable compared to the Gent, I just prefer the Spectre. And it's a different size and it's larger. And even though the designs are pretty similar in look, the difference was pretty apparent in size. And so a lot of people could make the case that, hey, you know, this one wouldn't work for me on the Expendables list because the knives are so different. But for me, no, it just was never going to be the case. I was never going to be in a situation where I carried the Gent if I owned the Spectre. So there's that. And then one really recent situation that might have worked for a number of people. I just reviewed this Artisan Tradition. I think it's the last video I posted. You know, and one of the comparisons I did was to the Kershaw method right here. And, you know, this is another one of those situations where maybe one of these two would end up being expendable. You know, I don't have to carry this knife anymore because I got this and it's a little bit better, or vice versa. Why would I like keep the more expensive knife if the method is just almost as good, you know, just at a cheaper price point? And again, that's beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and sometimes these things happen over the course of time. And in 6 months, I'll realize I've carried the method a bunch of times and then maybe haven't carried this one at all, or vice versa. So it's one of those things that's constantly evolving, and it's an idea that, you know, I'm just constantly adding to things. And it's always good to share, you know, your take on it, and it's always good for me to hear what anyone, you know, anyone watching feels about it, because everybody's idea of this is going to be very different. So yeah, that's the Expendables list. It's any knife that is no longer needed once you have something else, you know. And I decided to make the video about this now because I just thought with the Mantra versus the Sage, it was really, really appropriate. Because the Mantra is getting like no pocket time, like none. I mean, I'm just not using the thing, and I'm probably just gonna sell it, you know. And it made me remember the biggest situation with that CRKT LCK. So there you go, guys. That is the Expendables list. That is what it is all about. If you are still watching at this point, the Copper Natrix is actually out for delivery today, so I should have that on the channel very soon. But any other questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, let me know down below. I look forward to hearing from you, and definitely would like to hear your feedback about what you think is expendable in your collection. Thanks again, guys. Have a good one.